I was thinking about the Ten Commandments, from Exodus 20. You know what I'm talking about, the one that said, "I am the Lord your God," and all that. Hold on, let me go back to that. The chapter is called "The Ten Commandments, Idols and Altars," and it said, "And God spoke all these words: I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." And like the reason I want to talk about that is because that makes me think that like God is aware that other gods might exist and is like, I don't want you worshiping these other gods, which like, okay, cool, that's totally fine. I understand that making that as a rule for your community, like I'm your God, don't worship any other gods but me. What I don't like is because we have this whole thing with this whole trying to put the Ten Commandments in schools and courthouses. Is I don't like that because we have freedom of religion in the United States that says Congress shall make no law respecting a religion or disrespecting a religion, essentially. Basically, there will be no official religion and you have freedom to practice your religion, which means that basically the whole government has to follow that. And like then you'll have this, it'll be in a classroom and it'll say, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of slavery." And you'll be like from Mexico or an actual Egyptian in court and be like, "What?" You might be Christian, you might be Jewish, so that would be your law as well. But you might be Muslim, so I think the Muslim community has a slightly different version of the Ten Commandments. I've not actually read the Quran. I'd like to. I'm looking for a resource of a good like, academic one when I go to the bookstore after Christmas. Um, Probably going to talk about it. Probably going to talk about it. I've read the Torah. I've read the Hebrew Bible. I've read the New Testament. Catholic school. But this one always really didn't sit right with me when we were in a public. Well, when we were in Catholic school, yeah, the Ten Commandments. Okay, fine. I'm totally okay with that. If you choose to go to a Catholic school and your Catholic school chooses to require the Ten Commandments to be something that you learn about or that are there in every single classroom, I am totally a-okay with that because why wouldn't I be? That's a religious institution or religious school. Do I think it should be in every church? Probably if they want it to be. Do I think I have the right to say whether it should be any church? No, because it's not my religion. Which is why I'd like to be like, you shouldn't have this in my courthouse, in my classroom. But the thing is, like, I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I believe that the Bible should be taught in public schools in a very specific manner as a book of what it is, just a book that one of the two of the three major religions follow. And explaining that some of it may be considered mythology, some of it may be considered history, some of it may be considered fable. You can analyze it as literature. There's definitely a lot of ways to analyze it as literature. Now, if you weren't Christian and you read the Old Testament and the New Testament, you'd be like, hmm, aren't there a lot of prophecies being perfectly fulfilled here? Thing about that is that's a really good example of foreshadowing. Use of prophecy is a really good example of foreshadowing. Greek myths often use that. The Percy Jackson series was really good at that. A lot of times people will be like, well, the Ten Commandments are the basis of Western moral law. I don't necessarily agree with that because a lot of Western law comes from Greece, from Athens, in terms of like democracy and all that. And a lot of it also comes from Rome, pre Rome's change to Christianity. Uh, But now I want to talk about that whole there are other gods thing. So it's like God's like, there are other gods. Don't worship them. I'll get jealous. It's like, okay, well, if God's going to get jealous, we probably, should listen to him if he's our God and not worship other gods. And then it's, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Okay, interesting. Um, so does that mean if, let's say, hypothetically, I've never been exposed to the Bible or this particular passage, and I don't know who God is, does that mean God thinks I hate him? Have I broken the rules if I'm worshiping my gods from my religion? Okay, cool. You shall not misuse. This is the New International Version, I think, right? Yeah, this is Niv. So it used to say that you shall not take the Lord your God's name in vain, but now it says you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. I don't like that translation, but like that's one where there's the Tetragrammaton, and a lot of people in academic circles will use it. I find that particular one to be slightly disrespectful unless it's in a very specific context of you are writing it because you need it for an academic purpose, and you also mention the cultural background in this. Like that. Okay, understand. That's your rule. I'll respect that. But like things like "God damn it" and stuff that technically falls under freedom of speech. And people who believe in these religions still do that anyway. So yeah. Then we go into remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor. Blah blah blah. I actually wish we did this one. Like I wish we had this as a rule. And we actually used to have this thing called blue laws, which basically were laws that came from the Bible. And remember the Sabbath. Like in New York, where I live, it used to be illegal to work on Sundays. Then they changed things, but we still have something cool related to this. So in New York, you are only allowed to work 6 days in a 7 day period. You must be, the law actually is written so it says you must be allowed to take the Sabbath off or another day of your choice during a week. You may be asked to work on that day, however, no matter how many hours you have worked during that week, if your work is on the seventh day and you've worked 7 days in a single week, you shall be paid at the overtime rate, 1.5 times your normal rate unless otherwise negotiated by your employer and you in a contract. Uh, so yeah, that's a thing that I like. Um, I like that we have that. I actually really like that law. Honor your father and mother, good law. Probably could just be like, hey, be respectful, golden rule there. That comes in almost every religion. You shall not murder. I like that law. That one's in the regular laws. So we can say that one came from the Bible. You shall not commit adultery as one of my favorite mistakes in I think the 1690s. Somebody mistranslated a Bible, and the commandment said, "Thou shalt commit adultery," and everybody realized it was a misprint and a mistranslation, and they pulled the Bibles off the shelves. Uh, mm, that's a complicated one because, like, if you're in a monogamous relationship, sure, yeah, follow that rule, but the government shouldn't have any rules on that other than like the consent rules and stuff. You shall not steal. Yeah, we have that rule. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. That's basically don't lie in court. Don't covet your neighbor's house. That I like, jealousy and all that. But then it's instructions on how to make an altar. So, like, the Ten Commandments aren't terrible, but it's just like instead of marking these rules as like a holy book from a god and as inspired from divinity, be like, hey, we have these rules that make society work. One of them is you don't hurt each other. Because, if you're teaching fifth graders, you don't need to tell them that murder is a thing. Unfortunately, a lot of them know. Like, for example, I knew about death in first grade, second grade, 9/11 happened, and Earnhardt's death, too. Um, but yeah, not stealing, we learned that in kindergarten. Share, but don't take it until it's your turn. Just don't steal. Don't be. Jealousy's a weird one. Humans are naturally jealous. I don't necessarily like that. But don't give false testimony. For kids, that can just be don't be a tattletale. But I like that one. I do definitely like that we have that rule in actual societies that are, modern societies and everything. Because without that, without do not give false testimony, we'd probably have some problems. Um, but then like you go to so God is talking and everybody hears him. Then you go to Exodus 32 and they make this golden calf and God's like I'm going to kill everybody. And Moses has to calm him down and I absolutely love that Moses calms him down. And then after that, so we've got um this whole thing, the golden calf, and then Exodus 33 to 40 is just explaining the tabernacle and the altar, which is wild to me. But I understand why it's there because the Bible also is a book of regulations for people and like setting up the tabernacle and all that. And then you go to Leviticus and it's just rules. Leviticus is basically a law book. But I understand why they needed the other laws in Exodus. But have you ever actually thought about some of these things here?